So my full birth name is Ashley Cecilia Regalo. I'm now married, so my last name is Fagundes now.
So were you named after anyone, Ashley?
I was. So my middle name, Cecilia, was my grandmother's name on my mom's side.
So when and where were you born?
So I was born here in California, in Merced, California, so in the Valley, and I was born in 1982.
So now, when did your family immigrate to the United States?
So both of my parents were born here. My grandparents came over from the Azores when they were around 18 years old. So probably like late 40s, maybe between late 40s and early 50s. My dad's family is from the island of St. George, and my mom's family is from the island of Treseda.
And do you know, did both families settle in the Central Valley?
They did, yeah, actually. So on my dad's side, those grandparents, they came to Modesto, California, because they already had an uncle that was living there. And so they went there because they had someone that they could live with. And then for my mom's side of the family, my grandfather actually settled in Artesia down south, but didn't stay there long, ended up moving up north to the valley in the Snelling, like Hopeton area, kind of a small town, so not sure if people will recognize that, but that's where he ended up, again, because more family came and just to stay connected.
Do you know why they left the Azores?
For more opportunity, better opportunity. Education was really big on my dad's side of the family, and I think, just the United States, they knew other family members that were here that were having much more opportunities, even from like a business standpoint. So just to kind of live a better life and provide a better life for their children.
So when they did come to the Central Valley, did they go into agriculture? What were they doing in terms of work?
Yeah, so my dad's family, they actually would work on dairies and different things like that. My mom's family, same thing when they first moved here. Eventually, my mom's family ended up starting, my grandfather started his own dairy with a cousin, and then that separated and was just my grandfather, and then his sons came in on it. So they've worked in the dairy industry, I guess is what you could say, as far as agriculture in the beginning of them coming here.
And did anybody stay in agriculture, or did they move on to other industries?
Nope. The family dairy on my mom's side stayed in the family up until a few years ago. We still have a lot of people that still work in agriculture. My father actually taught agriculture in the high schools for over 30 years. My sister works for a farm credit company. We have people that are responsible for managing different crops and farms. So it's definitely, agriculture is still in our life. Played a big role in my life growing up as well. So
how did it play a big role in your life?
I think for me, with my grandpa having the dairy, we were out there a lot because my mom is one of 5 children, and so there's 3 boys and 2 daughters, and all 3 boys and my grandparents lived on the dairy. So the majority of the family was out there. So every weekend, pretty much every holiday, that's where we all went. So I always like to say I was born and raised on a dairy, even though I really wasn't, but that's where we spent the majority of our time. And so having that connection also shaped us growing up. My dad taught ag, like I mentioned. Having that, we were very familiar. Like, we got into 4-H at a very young age. We got into FFA in high school. We showed animals at the fair, at the county fairs and things like that. I was an FFA officer, and so it's just always kind of been a part of who we are,
Well, it sounds like you grew up having very strong bonds to your extended family, like your grandparents. Can you describe that? That isn't something that a lot of American kids have, you know, where they have those kinds of relationships. How did that define you in your childhood growing up?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate, I think, for that. My dad's parents passed away when I was very young. I want to say I was maybe 8 years old when my grandfather passed away, and my grandmother had already passed before that. So my memories of them are much lesser than the ones I have with my mom's grandparents, because like my mom's dad, my grandfather on that side, he didn't pass away till I was in my late 20s. Okay, so that's like a huge, I had 20 more years with him. So we definitely have a lot more memories, but we were always close to both sides. My dad is one of 9 siblings. So just first cousin wise, I have like over 25 first cousins. So that right there makes us pretty unique. And the majority of us all grew up in the Merced Atwater area. So holidays were huge. We are all still very close too, which I think is kind of unique, even though we've all kind of spread out. Some are in different states, some are in different parts of California, but we still try to uphold as many traditions as we can. And we definitely are a close-knit family, and I truly, truly appreciate that. And I think it's definitely helped me to like respect relationships and like understand unconditional love and values like that you may not get without having so many people on your team, Well,
let's talk a little bit about values and tradition and family, specifically as it's kind of tied to the Azores and to being Portuguese. Now, I imagine with your grandparents, it was important to them to maintain an Azorean identity, even though they were here in the United States. Can you tell me what it was like growing up in a Portuguese family? Were you always aware of the fact that you were Portuguese?
Well, it was very loud, because we are very loud people. No, I'm joking. Well, we are loud, but in all honesty, it was great. I will say, my family on both sides, my dad's family, like those grandparents were very musical. They loved the music part of the culture. My mom's side of the family, that's where I feel like we upheld more of the Portuguese and Azorean traditions, in the sense that we would have matanças every year, which is like a pig killing, for lack of better translation. But our family would have matanças every year growing up. Every February, we had them out at the dairy. We would make sweetbread, we make foulage, we make rice pudding, we would go to festas, eat sopas every weekend. I think and they kept that going, even how large our family was. And so I think it was important to them, even though they may not have said it out loud or expressed it, but it was definitely something that if we, like, they wanted all of us young grandkids in the kitchen learning how to, make the foulage and how to fry it and everything. So I think it was important for them to pass down those traditions. And it's something that I'm grateful for, because it's some good food. If you haven't had it, I recommend it.
So were the boys and the girls equally expected to be in the kitchen learning these things, or were there certain things for the grandsons as opposed to the granddaughters?
Yeah, I would definitely say they come from a much more traditional view. As far as, it was definitely the women in the kitchen. Even out with the matanças, the men are in charge of the actual, like, taking care of the animals, right? And then they use every part of the pig, and so the men basically dissect the pig. I can't think of a better word to use. And then all of those things come to the kitchen, and different things are made from there, whether it's linguiça or marcella or liver and onions, whatever it may be. But the women did the cooking of all those things. I would say maybe the men did the outside dirty work and the boys, and then the girls were definitely the ones in the kitchen, for sure.
So how about the language? Was it important to your grandparents and even to your parents that the children know how to speak Portuguese?
So interestingly enough, when my grandfather on my mom's side moved here, to keep them all straight, when they moved here, they actually didn't teach any of the 5 children Portuguese. My dad's family, they all spoke Portuguese. So myself, when I was growing up, my dad didn't want to teach us Portuguese because when he started elementary school here, he had a language barrier and he just didn't feel it important at that time to teach his daughters the language. And I remember my mom would always still tell him, you're gonna regret it, you should teach him. And so now I still tell him that, see, you should have taught me. So I would say, I always heard like my grandparents or like my dad's family, they would speak Portuguese like to their friends or whoever, but within our household and even like those extended like family events, it was mainly English speaking.
Did you ever learn the language, or do you want to learn the language?
I have not learned it. I would love to learn it. I would love for my son to learn it. So we'll see. It's on my bucket list. I hope one day.
I've no doubts. So now tell me, because you've talked about your grandparents and the importance of maintaining certain traditions with them. Was it also important, Ashley, to your parents that you retain a strong sense of Azorean Portuguese identity?
Yes, definitely. Growing up where the house that I grew up in is behind one of the Portuguese halls in my hometown of Atwater. And my mom was in charge of like renting out the hall. So we were always at the Portuguese hall, regardless of if we just had to unlock the door for a wedding that was going to come in. But it was basically in our backyard. We were always there. As young girls, my sister and I were signed up to dance Portuguese folklore, which we didn't want to do. We fought my mom about it. I remember marching in festa parades and we had to like carry a little parasol, and I have vague memories of those types of things. My my parents were much wanting us to know that we were Portuguese. My mom taught me how to make sweetbread. So that's definitely something. The other thing that was really, really important for our family, my great-grandfather on my mom's side, his name was Earl Souza, and he actually started the Hopeton Festa. It's St. John's Hopeton Festa, and he started that back in 1936. So that's something like that festa, you did not miss that festa. Every year, it's always on the same day, June 24th. And both sides of my family were very involved in that. So growing up, that was definitely something we knew. We called ourselves festa kids at that festa because we would run around barefoot. And but yeah, it's definitely something that my parents thought was important, still think is important. And I think they're proud that they did it, and they should be. And I know my sister and I and my cousins, we definitely identify, as being Portuguese American.
So why do you think it was so important to your parents?
I think it was important to them because the Portuguese culture is we're very proud, we're very hardworking, we're very family oriented. The values of the Portuguese culture is something I think that reflected their values, and in turn that's what they wanted their children's values, right? Like try to ingrain those types of values within their children. I think of myself today, and I look at my friends and my family, and it's like we're very close knit, and I would do anything for them. And, so those types of things, they follow you through life, which is a good thing. Hopefully I can instill that into my son and my sister into her kids. And so I think it goes beyond just like, I want you to know how to make sweetbread, versus like, this culture is amazing, and the values that it holds is something that can't necessarily be taught, just to someone off the street. You kind of have to like live and breathe it and have grown up with it.
So you mentioned that you have a son. How old is he?
He is 6 years old.
And it's important to you, as you've said, to kind of steep him in those traditions. How difficult is that, you think? He's going to be fourth generation American? Is that right? And so with all of the pressures to assimilate, how do you raise a child to recognize the value of being part of a community?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's hard to answer because he is still young. But I will say we're really blessed on where we live as far as the Portuguese American community. You have, a Portuguese bakery right up the street in Hanford. You can go to a different festa every weekend within an hour, 2-hour drive. So where we live, I think, is very welcoming to the Portuguese American community. I think the fact that our family has stayed so close, in which I hope he does the same with his cousins and aunts and uncles. I need to be better about about taking him to different cultural events and stuff like that. But it's definitely something that I want to make sure he knows what his heritage is. And I do explain to him, because he will help me when I make sweetbread, or if I make sopas. So I teach it, but they're still so little. He's like, can I just go play baseball? So, but I'm gonna definitely keep trying.
Well, let's talk a little bit about festas now. So you've been involved with them in the past, right? And you were an attendant?
Correct.
Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So most festas are honoring a specific saint, and every festa has what they call a queen. So the history of the festa goes all the way back to Portugal and Queen Isabel and taking care of the poor. And so every festa has a queen, and then typically like a senior queen and a junior queen, and then each queen has 2 side maids or attendants, again, senior and junior, and they're a representation of that festa. Every festa has a parade where the queens come and march, and again, family oriented. Every festa kind of goes to every festa to make the parade and, show off whatever saint they're representing. The dresses that are made are very intricate, gorgeous, very detailed. So I served as one of the side maids for the Holy Spirit Festa in Atwater, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm very grateful that I got to do it, but I did that probably in my late teens, might have been my early 20s, honestly, but I grew up going to festas. Like I mentioned, we did not miss St. John's in Hopeton. We would, because we were dancing in dance groups, we would go perform at different festas. So it's just always been a part of my growing up, my summers from May to August. You're definitely visiting a few festas.
So what role do festas play in your life now?
So now we're still go to St. John's in Hopeton. Like I said, it's just kind of unexpected. Also, something kind of silly, but a girlfriend of mine who's also part Portuguese, her and I said that we started our own festa. And so every summer, which we stopped because of the pandemic, but prior to that, we were 11 years strong in a row. And we would make sopas, FLAD, sweetbread, everything, have all the Portuguese desserts, linguiça, and we would just have our own festa every August. And it got to the point where we had to rent tables and chairs because we would have so many friends and family. People would hear, but oh, you guys are doing, oh, can we come? Can I invite so-and-so? And of course we're like, yes, absolutely. And so that our festa is something that like my son has become more accustomed to. I am getting my son involved in festas. He's gonna march in his first parade this summer, so hopefully we can continue to get more and more involved. Still try to go back home and go to different ones in Atwater, Merced area as well.
Okay, so I have a couple questions.
Okay.
The first is how, I didn't know that someone could say, hey, let's have a festa. I thought it always had to be like associated with.
It is. We call it a festa in quotes, just because we cook the food that they would normally serve at a festa, but it's not a real festa. Typically a festa, you're correct, it's associated with a, like I said, a particular saint, and then that saint is typically, you know, it's somewhere where there has to be a church and they do a mass and they bless the saint. So there's much more to it than just throwing some tables and chairs in your backyard and calling it that.
Saint Ashley. You're
Yeah,
Saint Ashley.
yeah, maybe.
So can you tell me, your little boy is going to be involved for the first time. What is the difference between the roles of males and females in the festas?
So, like I mentioned before, the queens and side maids, typically female. The males do still have a role that they usually would carry the saint or carry like the sign. The sign would state like what festa they were representing. So typically there are still males, they'll carry like the Azores flag, the Portuguese flag, they'll play in the band. There's all kinds of different roles. I would say the biggest thing is that females are the queens or the side maids versus like there's not males in that role.
So I know already the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. As you look at your little boy, why is it so important to you personally that he maintain a strong sense of identity or cultivate a strong sense of identity?
I think it's important to be proud of who you are. And I think if you are proud of who you are, it helps you to be confident. We're transitioning into this world of, you know, everything is social media and people want to grow up much faster than they should. And it's so easy for kids to get picked on or even adults to get picked on. And I just want him to be able to have confidence, you know, I've made so many friends outside of my family and the school I was going to because I went and got involved in the Portuguese American community and folklore groups and festas. And I have people that I'm still friends with today that I never went to school with them, you know, so for him to have other outlets, I think is important. But I think if you have a strong background and like pride in who you are, where your roots came from, it's just going to help you be more confident in yourself. And I think that that's something that is needed now and probably going to be needed as he goes on because he's only 6. So
you're talking about roots. Has anyone in your family gone back to the Azores since your grandparents left?
Yeah. Actually, myself, my sister, and my parents, we went back. But that was in 2001 is when we went. So that's the only time I've been. I want to go again. I would love to go again. Just let all this dust settle and hopefully we'll get back there. We talked about going this summer, but everything is still wishy-washy with requirements and precautions. My father-in-law is also Portuguese, and he went back, I think it was in like, I'll say the 80s, maybe the early 90s. And but that was the one time that him and his siblings went back. I have had other like uncles and aunts, they have gone also and visited as well. I think everybody, we want to go back because we have another uncle and some cousins that want to go. So we're trying to, find a time to do all that because it's so beautiful over there. And I mean, it's been 21 years since I've been, so I want to go back.
It sounds like it made an impression on you. What was it about being over there that was so meaningful that you want to go back?
The thing that I think that sticks with me the most, besides obviously how beautiful it is just aesthetically, beyond that, as soon as we landed, you're talking people we've never met before that are our cousins, right? And you would think that we had known them our entire lives. They're welcoming you into their home. Let me give you a tour of the island. I want to take you to this place. I want to take you to this place. And so that sense of family oriented is just something that, again, like we've never met these people, but they knew we were cousins, and so it really made the impression of like how bonded that really is. And then of course, like I said, it's gorgeous over there. So I would love to go back, and I'm sure it's changed so much since I've been there. But that sense of family, and even when we were there, like my grandparents' house was still standing, so like we got to go see those types of things. And so I'm grateful that I did, because I don't think that they are anymore. So just something like that, like even though that's like a material thing, it was still like so interesting to see. And I've always enjoyed traveling, and I've been to many countries. And so just seeing different like architecture and like, just the traditions of like, oh, you can't, go to a restaurant between these hours because they're not serving food, just things like that, just the nuances of the culture. I've always found that interesting, but because it was Azorean and that's, what I knew of growing up, I think it hit home even stronger.
So as a hope to, I imagine, eventually take your son there as well?
It would be great, yeah. My husband's never been either, and he's Portuguese as well. So I think it's definitely a trip that we all want to do. I probably wait a couple years for my son, let him be a little bit older, appreciate it a little bit more, survive the long flight.
So I have just a couple more questions, and it kind of has to do with what does being Portuguese mean to you?
I think being Portuguese means, like I've mentioned, just family oriented, proud of your culture, loving. We're very vibrant people, I feel. I was telling a coworker that I was coming to do this interview, and she said, mention your sweetbread, how everybody, if you make sweetbread, everybody's coming to work that day. So just like sharing that, that love of the culture that we have. I just think we're very, just hardworking and like loving people. And so that to me is what being Portuguese is. And I hope that I reflect that in my professional life, my personal life. I hope I can instill things like that in my son and other people that I meet in life.
Well, then I don't think I need to actually ask the last question, because it sounds like you kind of answered it. The last question I usually ask is how somebody feels that being Portuguese has shaped them, as a person. And that's always a hard question to answer, because we don't really think about that.
Right.
How can we not be who we are?
Yeah.
But it sounds like you kind of already got at that.
Yeah, it's so interesting just working with Denise over the last couple years now on this project, and just the things that you didn't realize, like even saying Azorean American versus Portuguese American. Like my family is not from Portugal, the mainland, like they're from the Azores, but we've always said we're Portuguese, you know? And so just little nuances like that. And it is a hard question because I don't think that people really reflect on how has this shaped me, you know? I mean, I look back now, and maybe it's now because I'm a mom or whatever it may be, and I think about how I fought my mom on being in the, you know, folklore group, and I did not want to dance. And then probably 10 years later, when I was old enough and I was in high school, I joined my own dance group on my own because I realized how important it was to me, and you know, started performing more and going to more and more festas. And so it just turned into this, you know, we always had this Portuguese part of us because we were celebrating the matanças and we were doing, you know, festas and the food, but then I embraced it even more, and then to be, you know, side maid and all of that kind of stuff. And you don't think about how that shaped you because in the moment you're just like, well, this is fun, and yeah, and I want to do this. And now thinking back, I think of all the lifelong friendships I've made, the stories I have to tell, and the, you know, the festas that I can take my son to, the bullfights, any of that type of stuff. And it's so amazing that I've got to experience all that. Like I said, we're very blessed with where we live to keep that culture alive. You don't feel so isolated from it because within a few hour drive, like I say, you could be at one of those events or with people of the same background. So it's definitely been a blessing, and I hope to continue it.